All of this, of course, comes a day after the U.S. ambassador to Libya and 3 other Americans were killed in a fiery assault on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. Our team of correspondents is covering every angle of this story, and we begin in Benghazi, where Charlie D'Agata made it inside the American consulate where the Americans died.
The attackers made sure there was nothing left. Every single room in every single building on this compound looks like this, torched and ransacked. No place was safe, and there was nowhere to hide. A young neighbor, Zahi Braham Najem, showed us around the ruins. He used to visit the consulate often before it was destroyed.
They burn everything, they steal everything, and they broke the dishes here.
The people in the neighborhood that we spoke to said it wasn't clear who was behind the attack. A Libyan security guard who tried to defend the compound but was wounded in the attack couldn't tell us either. But he did say it had the marks of a planned assault. We can't show you his face for his own safety. It was a setup, he said. They were armed with automatic weapons. Some had their faces covered and wore flak jackets. He told us there was an explosion when the attack began, and then the shooting started. He was wounded by shrapnel in his left leg, then he was shot in the other leg. He told us the guards were no match for the attackers. The American flag used to fly on that flagpole behind me. Now, that's about all that's left of America's presence in Benghazi. Most residents we spoke to were upset about the attack. Ambassador Stevens was well known here. Benghazi was where he helped the rebels overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. Lanan El Galal and Amna El Jariani, who both live next door in this residential neighborhood, said they were sorry.
We want to pass one thing to the Americans and to the whole world, that what happened here is not representing the Libyans, and especially not representing our Islam. We're not like that.
We feel shame, to be honest with you. We feel shame
really
for what happened. I mean, we wish we could.
To the U.S. I mean, it's such a loss.
We could have saved him, saved his. They were here to help us, and they helped us, and they were helping us, and we really need this help.
Charlie, we're told the consulate was a temporary facility, really just a house in a neighborhood. How was it defended?
Well, Scott, it's not what you would call a heavily fortified compound. It's barely a fortified compound. There are metal gates on 3 sides of it, and there is barbed wire on top of cement walls. And one thing, we didn't really notice any evidence of a forced entry at those gates or anywhere else on the compound, which made us a little bit curious. Also, we never saw anybody in the way of investigators, whether they were Libyan or American. And we were really able to come and go as we please, and there was nobody there protecting essentially a crime scene.
Charlie, thanks very much. Correspondent Charlie D'Agata is in Benghazi, Libya, where the ambassador and the other Americans died. He is learning more now about who their killers might be.
CBS News. Today, the president of Libya's National Congress, Mohammed al-Magariaf, visited the crime scene to have a look around. You're confident that the men behind this, the people behind this, will be caught?
Definitely.
Why? What makes you so confident?
Sooner or later. Because everyone is determined to.
It's still unclear who is behind the attack, but a radical Islamic group, Ansar al-Sharia, is considered a top suspect. The group is well known and based in Benghazi, emerging after the fall of former dictator Muammar Gaddafi. But Libya's Deputy Interior Minister, Wanis al-Sharaf, said he's looking at a number of different groups. I met members of Ansar al-Sharia that night, he told us. They came to me in person and denied all involvement. That same night, and do you believe them? He told us he'd need stronger evidence before placing blame. People had automatic weapons, RPGs, they were wearing flak jackets. This is an organized militant group. This isn't something that you can identify? You don't know who is responsible? There are weapons in every house, he told us, even RPGs. Having weapons doesn't mean you're part of a militia. He told us the consulate has finally been closed off to protect the scene. Later that day, Scott, we were approached by a senior Libyan security officer who was on duty that night. He handed us a piece of paper with what he said was the name of a chief suspect in the attack. He said that Ansar al-Sharia was responsible. He said 17 of his men were injured in a firefight that night, and he said they simply weren't prepared for such a sophisticated attack.
And when he says sophisticated attack, Charlie, what are we talking about?
Well, he described that the attackers came and closed off the roads in many vehicles. They were also armed with machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades, and they all struck at once. And they were able to get inside the embassy and launch their attacks with other demonstrators who had also gotten into the consulate.
Thanks, Charlie. The demonstrations began, of course, last week, and tonight we have new details about what happened when that mob overran the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. 4 Americans were killed, including the U.S. ambassador. Charlie D'Agata has been piecing this story together in Benghazi.
This cell phone video was shot in the chaotic hours after the consulate was attacked and Ambassador Chris Stevens died. Even in the darkness, you can see that some Libyans tried to save his life, carrying the body outside to safety. What you don't see is any of the ambassador's American security team, and it's still unclear how they became separated. Benghazi resident Fahad al-Bakush shot the video. He told us he heard somebody yell, "There's a body, a foreigner," but Bakush said nobody recognized the ambassador.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, hayy, hayy.
God is great. He's alive. He's alive. Bakush said he didn't see any bruising or bleeding, but the ambassador's face was red and his lips were black. He told us they tried to find a doctor in the crowd, but there was none. Then he helped get the ambassador to the hospital. As the attack continued on the consulate, a Libyan security official told us he and his team started to evacuate the remaining 30 Americans to a safe house a mile and a half away. He didn't want to be identified for fear of revenge. But less than an hour after the consulate's staff made it to the safe house, it also came under attack. The first attack was from RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. Then there were mortars. He told us the strikes were extremely accurate, as if the attackers knew exactly what they were aiming for. When we toured the safe house, his account seemed to add up. We saw remnants of mortars on the roof, blood-stained American flak jackets, and a helmet. The injured Americans were escorted to the Benghazi airport, Scott, with the help of a local militia that stepped in to help back up the consulate's security. All the remaining members of the U.S. staff were then transported to Germany.
Charlie, thanks very much.